Hey guys, what is going on? I hope you all are doing well today. Elliot here, welcome back to The Fragrance Well. Today we're gonna do another full review of a fragrance that's from a brand that's probably not as well known, but I'm gonna give them a little bit of shine today. The brand is Get Right Fragrances. The fragrance is going to be this one here. It's their latest release called the Purple Label Clean Cashmere. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so Get Right Fragrances. This is a brand I have talked about before on this channel, primarily with this fragrance here, Clean Team Signature. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about that one. I've talked about it before. As I said before, this is about this one, their latest release, Clean Team, the Purple Label, Clean Cashmere. So, first of all, presentation, it comes in a box like this. As far as I know, all their fragrances come in a box like this. It's a pretty standard, simple box, but it's not too bulky or anything like that. Flips up. There's a little cutout there. The fragrance fits in there. So if anybody's interested in, displaying their fragrances with the packaging, that's a good one because it doesn't take up too much space. And again, here's the bottle. Hang on, let me just make sure there's not fingerprints all over it. Yeah, but here's the bottle. All their fragrances come in a 50 milliliter size. You can kind of see the writing on it, a little bit of writing there. This is an eau de parfum concentration. And I don't have any information on who the perfumer is, so I cannot share that. So that's the presentation. What does the fragrance smell like? So I would classify this fragrance as a slightly fizzy, fruity, floral, creamy, sweet fragrance. Of course, the namesake suggests that it is a cashmere fragrance. I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't have a lot of experience with like cashmere forward fragrances, so I did a little bit of research just reading up on what is a cashmere fragrance exactly. Kind of meant to remind you of the cashmere fabric, if you will. Soft and cozy and inviting. I don't own any cashmere like sweaters or anything like that, but I've certainly checked out a few. That is some amazing fabric. So the listed top notes are pineapple, bergamot, blackcurrant, and blackberry. The heart notes are coconut, lavender, jasmine, and iris. The base notes are cashmere, musk, vanilla, and sandalwood. So as soon as you spray this on, it definitely has a very kind of slightly effervescent, fruity vibe to it. You get a lot of fruits on the top. You definitely get a little bit of this somewhat tropical vibe as well coming from that coconut accord. You do get a lot of florals and it is quite creamy and quite sweet. As the fragrance kind of gets past the opening, a little bit of that fruitiness, just a little bit of it does kind of die down. The effervescence dies down a little bit, but then you are left with this very full but airy, creamy sweetness that is very floral centered. It's basically a mix of the jasmine and iris if I had to pick out the accords, and you definitely still keep that coconut vibe too, so it keeps it somewhat tropical. The sweetness that this fragrance gives off is definitely of that very sensual and alluring quality. When I first tested the fragrance on my skin, when it got to that part of the fragrance, I was picking it up in the air, so it does, at least as far as I can tell, it does have some pretty good push off the skin, but I kept going back to it. It just kept kind of reeling me in, so it has that kind of alluring sweetness to it that's not too much. As you get a little bit closer to the full dry down, when you're starting to get more towards the base notes, the sweetness is still there, but a lot of that fizziness is pretty much gone at this point, and you're starting to get a little bit more of that musky, woody quality to it. Now, once it gets past pretty much the bulk of the heart of the fragrance and really gets deeper into the dry down, it kind of loses that allure. A lot of that sweetness has actually kind of faded away and it's kind of left, honestly, smelling a lot like this fragrance here. I think there's a lot of similar base notes in this fragrance. It's kind of woody and musky, so it kind of smells a little bit like this one, interestingly enough, even though that fragrance I would consider to be more of kind of a soapy, clean fragrance. This one, once it dries down to that, it kind of resembles that, so a lot of the sweetness kind of goes away. And honestly, to me, the best part of the fragrance has passed once you get to that point. That's kind of like 4 to 5 hours in. So that's pretty much what the fragrance smells like. What can I best compare it to if I had to compare it? Well, this is what I would say. The sweet and alluring quality doesn't really smell like this fragrance, but it kind of has the same kind of function. So this is Stronger With You, absolutely. If you know anything about the Stronger With You, Intensely, and Absolutelys of the world, they all have this very kind of sweet, alluring quality to them. They really pull you in because they have a sweet sexiness to them. However, this fragrance here does not have the same style of sweetness. That's more of a spicy and gourmand sweetness, while this is more of a floral and creamy sweetness. So it has that same kind of functionality, but if I had to compare it to a fragrance that it smells at least somewhat close to, it's gonna be more like this, Prada L'Homme Intense. Prada L'Homme Intense, this is iris, creamy, makeup-y iris with a lot of sweetness to it, also some leathery-like accords. By the way, I forgot to mention, on my skin at a certain point with this fragrance, the fragrance I'm talking about, Purple Label, I do actually get some kind of smoky, almost leatheriness kind of hidden way in the background. I wouldn't call that a feature of the fragrance, but I thought I was going nuts because I smelled it the first time. I'm like, maybe I'm just tripping. But as I wore it a couple more times and gave it full wears, I noticed that same quality. So I would say there's something in there giving off a little bit of that, but it's not necessarily a marketed standpoint of the fragrance. It's not even a listed accord. I guess it's just a characteristic I experience on my skin, but I do think it's worth pointing out. That being said, it's most closely resembled to, in terms of what it smells like and how the fragrance works, similar to something like this. Creamy, floral sweetness rather than the spicy kind of gourmand-like sweetness of a Stronger With You. But they both kind of have that same functionality where the sweetness that it does have, it really pulls you in. All right, real quick, let's talk about performance. So as I mentioned before, at least through the first half of the fragrance wearing experience, or maybe even the first 2/3, the fragrance pushes off your skin very nicely. At least it does it off of my skin. So I would say the projection and sillage on it is going to be pretty good. I can't really put a number on it. I didn't do that kind of testing. But if I had to say, you know, at least within arm's width, maybe a little bit further, especially depending on how much of the fragrance you choose to wear and where you're going and what you're doing, I would say the sillage and the projection on it is pretty good. In terms of how long the fragrance lasts, again, I've only worn it a few times. I can't really give a fully quantifiable number, but based on the wears I have, I would give it a 6 to 8 hours before it really becomes a complete skin scent. But in terms of it just kind of being on your skin and still being detectable, pretty much all day. Yeah, maybe 12 to 14 hours if I just had to put a number on it, where it's definitely detectable still on your skin. But I would say the most functional and most enjoyable part of the fragrance is going to be in that 4 to 5 hour mark. That's when it starts to break down to the deep dry down and it just loses a lot of that sexy allure that it has. So for me, from a functionality standpoint, in terms of what I think the fragrance excels at, that kind of goes away before the fragrance is fully done. Real quick, let's talk about compliment factor. This fragrance definitely has the potential to pull compliments. If I had to put a number on it, I would say it's probably an 8 to 9 out of 10. Like I said, it has that sexy, sweet allure that a lot of the compliment getter fragrances that are on the designer market these days have in its own way. While those tend to be more warm and sweet and sexy, this one's more of a cooling, slightly tropical, floral sweetness and with a little bit of creaminess to it as well. Even though it's walking an adjacent lane to those kind of gourmands that are, you know, so popular these days, but they have the same functionality in my opinion. All right, so let me give my final thoughts on this fragrance. If I had to give it a rating number, I would say it's a solid 7 out of 10. I do like the fragrance. I don't necessarily love it, but I do think it can serve a purpose in anyone's collection. Like I said, I don't necessarily have anything in my collection that directly compares to this. I might have smelled something in passing that might smell a little bit more similar than some of the comparisons I gave today, but right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. I forgot to mention earlier, this fragrance is definitely unisex, so it can work on a woman. I'd be willing to bet this is one of those fragrances that wears maybe slightly more feminine on a woman and slightly more masculine on a man. I did mention that I picked up some almost leathery and smoky like accords on with the fragrance on my skin once it got a little bit deeper into the wear. Yes, but in full conclusion, I think it's a solid fragrance release from a smaller independent house that I think is trying to do some great things. And once I learned that they actually had a new release, I actually didn't know it. I saw it through another Facebook group that they had a new release. So I was like, well, I gotta check this fragrance out. I'm glad I've gotten to do so. It is a good release compared to what they already have. It's something different outside of once it gets into the deep dry down. I think it's a little too similar to this one here, Clean Team Signature. But before that, I think the fragrance definitely can serve a great purpose. If I had to put a seasonality on the fragrance, I would say it's a transition month fragrance, primarily spring and fall. But honestly, it can be worn at any time. You would just adjust the sprays up or down, adjust them down for higher heat, for extreme cold, adjust them up. So that's it. That's my full review on this fragrance here. Get Right Fragrances, Clean Cashmere, the purple label is what they call it. So if you think this is a fragrance you might be interested in, I'll leave a link to the website below. It's not an affiliate link. I don't have any affiliations with them. But as far as I know, you can only buy the fragrance directly from them right now. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Remember to hit that bell icon so you can be notified of when I upload new content. Remember to be well and smell well, and I will see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.